Welcome to the Financial Feast podcast. I'm Kevin.
And I'm Zach.
And today we're going to be talking about how much house can you afford?
Welcome back, everybody, to episode number 21.
Yes, 21.
Today we're going to be discussing how much house can you afford, because a lot of people, when they're looking at houses, whether that's owning houses or renting houses, yes, this does apply to renting houses as well.
Yes.
They overget what they can actually get,
Yeah.
right? And then they kind of stick themselves.
Yes.
And we want to avoid those issues of buying too much house. So we're going to talk today about how much house you can afford and how to figure out how much house you can afford in your own budget. So what we're going to do is we're going to answer a couple different questions on how we think that you can kind of figure out for you. These are pretty well-known things, different ways people come up with for you to figure out how much house you can own,
Yes.
how much house you can buy. And we're going to discuss which one we think is better, because we think one is a little bit better than the other one.
Yeah.
And then we're going to help explain some hidden costs that are included in home buying that a lot of people just don't consider
Yes.
when they're buying a house. And because of that, they even if they do this preliminary kind of work,
I know.
they're still kind of stuck.
Yeah.
Because they haven't thought through everything. So we want to
Right.
help you think through everything.
Yeah.
Before we get to that, though,
Yes.
food,
Oh, yep.
financial feast,
Yep.
food. It's quick for anybody who's new. We do talk about food every single episode at the beginning for only for a couple minutes. So you can hold on for a couple minutes. If you don't want to listen to it, just fast forward it. But of course you want to listen to it.
Of course you do.
Because
Come
it's
on
food.
now.
Why don't you want to listen to food? So we've been talking about steak a lot.
Yes.
We're going to shift to vegetables.
Oh,
We're doing a hard turn.
that is really hard.
I have a pretty strong opinion on what I think the best vegetable is.
Okay.
I would like to know what you think the best vegetable is.
Hmm.
I think that's a sticky subject because a lot of people just don't like vegetables.
Yeah.
But I really enjoy
they're
vegetables.
okay.
I like a
don't
vegetable.
mind vegetables. For me, I actually really like carrots.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you a raw carrot or are you like cooked carrot?
I actually like both. I
Okay.
do not really have a preference on either because typically they're kind of like a vegetable that you could just it goes better with other vegetables with it, you know?
Okay.
So
Okay.
I really like both. How about you though?
So I love asparagus. If I had to pick
Really?
a vegetable that I was going to go with,
Oh,
it's
man.
asparagus. I love asparagus.
I
love asparagus.
It's okay.
I know.
but that
that's
would
why
not
I told
be
you
my number
before
one.
this it was a hard take because
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people like asparagus. I really like asparagus.
Yeah, I mean,
If I had to go with
someone
the
out there had
vegetable-
to buy it, right?
I love it. So, and it's funny because growing up, I only ate raw carrots. I would not eat cooked carrots. And since getting married, maybe it's like a little bit fake. But my mother-in-law makes cooked carrots, but she like boils them in like sugar,
Ooh,
so they're like
yes.
sweet and delicious. So I'll eat them. I
Yeah.
really like them. So I've turned my view on cooked carrots. But I feel like my mom would just like cook carrots in water and they would just be gross. So maybe that's
Soggy.
why I didn't like
Yeah,
cooked carrots.
I mean,
and
that
now
makes
they're like
sense.
sweet and delicious when my mother-in-law makes
Yeah,
them.
you got to
So-
put stuff with them. Yeah,
Yeah.
that does add to the flavor
All
for
right,
sure.
That's where I'm at. So we got asparagus and cooked carrots and raw carrots.
Yeah,
We're pretty healthy over here.
I know.
Um,
Steak and carrots.
So, how much house can you afford? Now you've owned a house for a while,
Yep,
right?
I have.
When you
I've
guys
owned two
first
houses.
bought your house, your first house, yeah,
Yep.
because you're right. This is your second house. When you first bought your house,
Yep.
how much work did you do personally to get into really digging into the numbers? Because I know you're more of a numbers
Yes.
guy than I have been long term. Did you guys like really get into the numbers on like this is how much house we can afford before you even started looking, or did you just kind of look and then kind of go from there?
Well, with the first house, we didn't really get into the numbers as much,
Okay.
and I learned from that.
Okay.
And when we got the second house, I definitely did do a deep number dive to make sure that everything was good. But yeah, the first house, we were more along the lines of, here's how much we were pre-approved for.
Yeah.
Let's go out and do something.
Yeah.
And let's go get a house. And not really thinking of all the other stuff that goes into it. Plus, I bought a home that was built in like 1900 something. So it was super old.
A lot of stuff that you
And
kinda
there
do
was a
with
lot
that.
of regrets.
Yeah.
But it was a good starter home. It was okay.
Yeah, so for our house, we've lived in the same house now since we got married 9 years ago. And for us, it was the same thing. We got approved for a certain amount, and we went and found the house that worked in that range.
Yep.
And we've been there. And looking back now, what we're going to talk about here is we're going to tell kind of two ways to figure out how to figure out that budget amount that you should be looking at a house.
Yeah.
And the one that we recommend, we were not in that range for our house. And it's because our salaries were significantly less than they are now. So we're fine now. We're in that range plenty now. But when we first got it, we weren't. And it's worked out because we were able to make the payments. It was just more tight than it probably should have been.
Yeah.
Right? So I just thought that was interesting because we didn't talk about that. And I think that's where a lot of people are.
I think so too.
I think they go to the bank or they go to a mortgage lender and they get pre-approved for a certain amount.
And they think that's their budget.
Go with that.
Yep. They think that's what they know. Like, they know what we can afford. Let's just go with that. Yeah.
And we're going to come in with a strong opinion of don't do that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Don't do that because the mortgage lenders out there are using different parameters to figure out the amounts that they should that you're getting a pre-approved for.
Yeah. They're using credit score more than anything else.
Yeah. And it's not wrong. It's not that they're bad.
No.
But it might not make the most sense for you.
Yes.
Right? So that's where we're at. We're going to talk about two different ways to figure out your home that you can afford. So what we're going to do really quick is I'm just going to list them out. And I'm going to give a couple quick qualifiers. Right? So the first one is 3 times your income. So let's say you make $80,000 as a couple. 3 times your income, $240,000.
Yep.
So they say you make $80,000 pre-tax. That's your total salary. They say you can then buy a house for $240,000. That's option number 1.
Yeah.
Option number 2 is 25 to 30% of your take-home pay is what you should be doing to figure out what your house budget is.
Yes.
And that's the one, just spoiler alert,
yeah,
that's the one that we're leading to. All right.
Yeah.
So we're not in the 3 times your income. We're in the 25 to 30% of your take-home pay. So before we get deeper into this, let's do a couple quick qualifiers about take-home pay, right? Because I think some people might be concerned about that. So first of all, how do I figure out, or why don't, before we get that, why don't you explain what take-home pay is?
Yeah, it's just it's really easy in its own sense, but it's just basically what you get in the bank after taxes have been taken out. So whatever you get deposited in your account from your job, that your 401k may have been taken out, everything else was taken out, taxes were taken out, that is your take-home pay. Now, when we're talking about 3 times your income qualifier there, we're talking about gross income.
Correct.
And
big difference.
Difference with that is when you start a job, they'll say you're going to get paid $80,000 salary a year, or you'll get paid $80,000 a year. That's gross. That's before taxes are taken out. So 3 times your income, if we're talking about 80, still the $240,000, that's the gross income amount.
Yeah.
Now, when we're talking about the net income, this is you're getting paid $80,000 a year, but we're taking home the money after the taxes, so it would be less.
Yeah.
Net income.
When we're talking about 25% of your take home, right? How do we figure out what that number is then? All right, so we're saying we want to do take home. We don't want to do gross. We don't want to 25% of my gross because I'm not seeing a good portion of that money because some of that's getting taxed.
Yes.
So I want to get after tax, post tax, take home 25% of that, or 30, 25 to 30, decent range. How do I figure out that number?
Yeah, so there's a couple ways to do it. What you can actually do is you can go onto smartasset.com and search take home pay calculator, and you'll be able to put your location in, some other kind of information, and it'll do the work for you to take out your taxes. Mm-hmm. So once you have it, you can multiply it by 0.25 if you're trying to do 25%, or 0.3 for 30%.
Yeah.
And that right there is your take home pay, 25% or 30, whatever, or in between, or whatever you're trying to go for at that point.
Yeah. You can also just really simply just look at your pay stub, right?
Yeah.
You get a pay stub, look at it, and then multiply it by, if you're getting bi-weekly, right, you're going to multiply it by 2 for the month, and then multiply it by 12 for the year. If you're getting monthly, by 12, if you're getting some random thing. This could be difficult. We get a little more difficult when it comes to maybe some commission-based jobs.
Yeah.
Where you're fluctuating a little bit, but we really want to figure out that take-home pay, right? That's so important. Because if you're working off of your gross, you're going to have inaccurate numbers.
Yes.
And you're really going to stick yourself.
Even worse than it would be if you're going off the pre-approval.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So why then Kevin, do we say 25 to 30% of your take home instead of, let's say, 45% of your take home?
Yeah, so this number, kind of going back to some previous episodes where we were talking a little bit about financial independence, retirement, maybe retiring early, or just retiring on time even, it does help you get a higher rate of savings. So you're able to, if you just take 25% for where you live, you're able to then take more money and put it into savings for future accounts.
Yeah.
Therefore, if you can live off 25%, you have more in the back end to do other things.
Yeah. So for those of you just kind of tuning in, maybe this is the first episode you've listened to. Episode number 19, 2 episodes ago, we talked about financial independence and kind of what that looks like and a little bit of a roadmap to get there that people are pursuing who are on that financial independence kind of track. And one of the things we talked about last week, which was index fund, long-term investing in index funds. This one is just affordable housing, making sure that you're not buying a house that's going to make you quote-unquote house poor. If you haven't heard that term, that's just having way too much house for your budget.
Yeah.
So figuring out what works for you so that way you are still able to achieve your goals long-term, but still live a life that's very middle class. We don't want you to be like eating, mac and cheese and hot dogs for, not that there's anything wrong with that, right?
I love mac and cheese and hot dogs.
We don't want you to eating that every single meal because you can't afford anything else.
Yeah.
Right? But we want you to be able to live in a house that's going to meet your needs, that's going to be able to provide you with some joy and comfort, right? But it's not going to break the bank.
Right.
Okay, so that's where we're at. The 25 to 30% has historically been really a good way to kind of get a decent house that works for you in your budget, but still be able to hit these other goals that we're talking about as far as investing long term and doing these savings goals, and then still being able to go on vacation, still being able to eat a decent amount of food and good food and all these other things. So that's where we're at. So what we're going to do now is I want to work through these two situations, this 3 times your income and this 25 to 30% of your take-home pay, and we're going to just look at a situation, a scenario, and compare these two so you can see that we're not just pulling random information.
Yeah.
And we actually have reasoning behind why we think one is better than the other.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is I'm going to work off of $80,000
Yep.
as a general salary. And the reason I'm doing that is because that's about the average salary for American families is about $80,000. Obviously, it fluctuates across the country, but for an average, $80,000. So 80 grand is what we're going to be working off of. This is pre-tax, okay? So let's, option number 1, 3 times your income. Kevin, you're the math man. 3 times your income. If we're $80,000, what amount can we spend or buy, I guess, for a house?
That'd be $240,000.
Look at that math right there, people.
Look at that going.
He went to college. Smart dude. All right, so $240,000, all right, for a house. For both of these situations, we're going to work off of the current interest rate. So we're at about 7% interest rate right now.
Yep.
When you buy a house, we're just going to work off of that for both these situations, and we're going to assume there's a $10,000 down payment.
Yeah.
For both these situations, just to make it easy, all right? Because generally you need a down payment of something, 3.5% to get a house, essentially. So I just want to make it easy. So if we have a $240,000 house,
Yep.
and we have 7% interest,
Yep.
okay, what would the monthly payment be, Mr. Mathman?
It would be $2,183.
And you want to walk us through where you got that number from?
Yeah. So basically, what we're doing is we're taking the mortgage, which would be about $1,530, and we're adding $104 in for homeowners insurance, $163 in for PMI, principal mortgage interest, and $368 for property taxes, all bundled up into a nice $2,183 a month payment.
And really quick, can you explain what you told us what PMI is? Can you explain why we have the PMI?
Yeah, so PMI is we put $10,000 down, which is good, right? But we did not put enough down to where the bank feels comfortable with. Are they going to go into a foreclosure, all the other stuff? So the bank, to protect itself, charges a principal mortgage interest rate where you have to pay a little bit more on each payment until you hit a certain threshold. And that's typically when you've paid at least 20% into it. And at that point, it'll come off. You no longer have to pay it anymore. But it's just a measure to put in that was put in, I believe, in '08 after the financial crisis, where there was all the housing issues going on. The banks kind of put that in to protect themselves. And unfortunately, if you are putting $10,000 down on a $240,000 house, you will have to pay PMI.
Yeah.
But it does fall off.
Yeah. All right, so what we did here is 3 times your income, you buy a house for $240,000. Kevin walked through the numbers. So this is including your mortgage.
Yes.
This is also including not just your mortgage, but it includes your home insurance, it includes PMI, and it includes property and taxes. So all of these numbers combined is $2,183 a month, which if you're like, hey, I make 80 grand a year, $2,183 isn't that much money. Right, every single month. Okay, so let's go to option number 2, and then we're going to work through the numbers a little bit more to really compare these two. So option number 2, 25% of your take home, and then we're going to do option number 2B is 30% of your take home. We're going to do 2 different numbers here. Using the same thing, so we're working through a 7% interest rate. We still make $80,000, right? We're going to work through our mortgage, we're going to work through our home insurance, we're going to work through our PMI, and we're going to work in the property taxes. All these numbers are included. We're just taking now 25% and 30%. What is 25% of your take-home pay?
Yeah.
And then what can we? What's a house that we could get off of that for monthly payments?
Yeah. So if you're doing your 25%, so you have your $80,000, you're looking at take-home pay, which is about $5,228 monthly. So 25% of that would be about $1,300.
Okay.
Around that area, and right there you see $1,300, but $2,183 was the total gross, right? So that one was with the total gross. So if you're looking at a monthly of 25%, and that's about $1,300, a little over $1,307 to be official.
Yep. And then 30% of the same thing is $1,500, about $1,560, right?
Yeah.
So we've now dropped from $2,100 essentially, if we're doing 3 times our salary, to 25% would be $1,300, and 30% would be $1,500.
Yeah.
So we can see a drop here from $2,100, $2,200 almost, all the way down to $1,300. So that's a drop of a decent amount of money, $800.
Yeah, it is.
Right? $800 a month that we're not putting toward a house anymore. When we go through the math, though, the reason that this is important to realize is you're like, well, $1,300 isn't that much money, right? $1,300, what kind of house can I get for $1,300? I look at the 3 times percent interest, or 3 times my income, and I can afford $2,100 a month, right? So I could easily get a house and buy that and have $2,100 a month because I make 80 grand. But what we don't realize, what a lot of people aren't thinking through, is what percentage of your take home is $2,100, $2,183, if you're making $80,000 in total amount?
Yeah, it's 42% of your month.
It's 42% of your, whatever you're bringing home, 42% of it is just going to your house.
Yeah.
So let's just think through this. Can you afford to spend 42% of your total take-home amount on a house payment every single month?
Technically, you can afford to do it. It just would be harder.
Okay. Why is that harder? What does then that limit you to doing?
Right. So some other stuff we're going to talk about is kind of the hidden costs, right? And we'll be talking about those in a minute here. So those will also be in play. And you also won't be able to do that savings for retirement, savings that we were talking about for the financial freedom aspect, and being more free to be able to go out to eat and do all the stuff you want to do. This is just a house payment. This means, you know, if you have car payments, credit cards, student loans, any of that stuff, you're really getting up to that higher debt to income ratio.
Yeah.
And usually at 45%, most people won't even give you anything.
Yeah.
And if you're at 42% for a house, that leaves you 3% to really play with, and that's not much.
Yeah, so realtors will give generally up to about 36% is what they go to. This is 42%. So
Yeah.
to your point, you're already up 6% on top of what realtors are going to show you on a house. So mathematically, if we're doing 3 times my income, a real estate agent's not even going to show me that house generally because they
No.
think that's too much
Yeah.
for me. And like Kevin said, that's not including any other debts that you have.
I know.
That's not including going on vacation or saving for retirement or eating food or utilities or any of these other costs that go into just living life.
Yeah.
Right? Paying for your students, your kids' schooling or whatever else you have.
Yeah.
So then we get to the 25% of your take home. It gets a little bit smaller. You're not going to be able to get as much of a house. You get $1,300 a month instead of a $240,000 house. Now you're safely down to about a $150,000 house.
Yeah.
If we bump it up to $30,000 or 30%, and we're doing $1,568, we're now up to a $180,000 house. So we can. It's a decent drop here, $90,000 to $60,000.
Yeah.
Right. Can you still get a decent sized house for $180,000?
It depends on your location.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Possibly. So what we're going to do here is if this isn't working for you, right? You're at, you know what? I really want to stick at this 25%. I really want to stick at this 30%. But I can't find a house that really works for me.
Yeah.
Okay. There's facts to consider when you're buying a house. And one of the major facts to consider is interest rate.
Yes.
With both of these scenarios, we ran a 7% interest rate. Right?
That's the current rate.
What is your interest rate? Do you know what your interest rate is
I
on your
do.
house right now?
Mine is 3.2.
Okay, so mine is also 3.2. I think we might be 3.21.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're significantly lower
Yes.
than 7%. Significantly lower. And rates constantly are changing,
Yes.
right? They might not drop 4% by next year, but chances are they're going to drop. They're not going to probably go much higher. They're going to drop. So what we need to think through is interest rate is a big deal. So in the illustrations above, we use 7% interest rate. Let's just imagine you're like, you know what, for now, I'm just going to rent.
Yeah. Nothing wrong with renting.
Nothing wrong with renting. I can't find a house that I love that I really want to sit in for and commit to for the next 5 to 10 years for 30% of my budget. But I can find a rental that I'm okay with for 30% of my budget.
Yeah.
Okay. Knowing that it's just going to be a temporary thing, maybe a year out. Let me see if I can wait a year, see if interest rates drop. If interest rates do drop from 7% to 4%,
Yeah.
now I can afford at 30% of my budget instead of buying a house for $180,000, not making any more money. I'm still making $80,000 and I'm still using 30% of that take home. I can now buy a house at 4% instead of 7% for $210,000.
Yeah.
Right? Which is only 30 grand less than the 3 times your income house.
Yeah.
That now opens up your options a lot. That might be a real big indicator that you might need to wait for interest rates to drop.
Yeah, absolutely. And once again, there is nothing wrong with renting. We did do a previous episode on kind of the pros of renting. And if you rent for just a year, save up that money to put on a bigger down payment so that you could afford even maybe more house. That's something to definitely consider. So, yeah, when you're looking at it, the interest rate is probably the number one thing to take into consideration for a house.
And it's really, it's not in any of your control. You can't do anything to change the interest rate.
No.
But you can just wait
Yeah.
until the interest rate comes down.
Yeah.
Right? So you might have to move to a lower income level area, and not lower income, but lower expense area, and get a rental there, and maybe drive a little bit farther for the time being until interest rates come down. But don't just stick yourself and get something where you're paying 42% of your take home because you really want a house.
Yes.
Right? That's just not good long-term financial sense.
No. And also another thing to consider. So when we're looking at kind of the interest rate being the number one consideration for houses, there's other costs that actually come up that you need to consider. So when we're talking about 25%, don't just think, and the number one thing that people do is when they get that mortgage payment, they're like, that's how much it costs me to have a house.
Correct.
Like, it's going to cost me $1,500. Well, let's just move some stuff around. Okay, great. I can afford $1,500. And then you get your electric bill. You get your water bill, your gas bill, your trash bill, your utilities, your age of the house can affect these, right? So if your house is older, like when I bought one that was in the 1900, guess what? It didn't have great insulation.
Yeah.
So the heating bill was always high.
Yeah.
The electric bill was high. So these are things that you need to consider when you're going into your house, when you're looking at a house, making sure that, if the age of the house is older, okay, how does it seem like when you walk in? Does it seem cooled down? How does the central air work, the heat, if there is those things, all these things you need to take into account. And then there's maintenance and repairs.
Yeah, what's the age of the appliances?
Yeah.
Right? What's the age? When was the furnace replaced? When was the roof replaced? Does it need to be replaced in 3 or 4 years? How much money is that going to cost me?
Right. Planning for that, siding, all the big expenses that you don't really think about in a house. And this is not cosmetic. This is not like painting your house, right?
Yeah.
Not painting the inside of a house. That's something that you do that makes it look nice, but not necessarily a need to do.
Yeah.
These are things that you might need to do.
Yeah,
right?
if your hot water heater dies tomorrow, Kevin, you're going to have to buy another hot water heater.
Yep.
Because I don't think your wife and your children, or you, really, frankly, let's be honest,
who
are going to be happy getting cold showers for the next 6 months.
Right, exactly. And these are big ticket items. So knowing when all that stuff is done, and you can also get a home inspection, it'll tell you all that stuff.
Yeah.
But being able to plan for that is key. So if you have a $1,500 mortgage payment, but you know that, the hot water heater is going to go next year, possibly getting aside a separate fund for that when it does happen, and there you go. But there's also upgrades. There's insurance, so homeowners insurance, the PMI that we talked about, and if you're in a floodplain, flood insurance.
Yep. Which one of us has here, and it's not the Eagles fan.
It is not. It is me.
It's this guy.
I live close to a river, so it has not flooded in 90 years. But apparently, there's an 100-year flood rule that if it's flooded in the last 100 years, then you have to pay flood insurance.
So you are stuck for another 10 years.
So I'm stuck for 10 years. So if it floods in the ninth year, I'm going to be
flood
really,
in year 99.
Yeah, I'm going to be really ticked off if it does. But then there's also the very end, the little sneaky closing costs.
Yeah.
2 to 5% of the actual house.
Yeah, so when you buy a house, right, a lot of people are like, oh, I bought a $300,000 house, so I'm giving them $300,000. No, you're not. You're giving them more than $300,000. Why is that? Well, because you're paying somebody else that had to do all this work in a real estate company, and they're getting closing costs, which is 2 to 5% of your total investment.
Yeah.
So that could really add up, right? You could be paying $7,000, $8,000, $9,000, $12,000, depending on what their costs were and what the price of your house is, on top of just your house price immediately before you even moved in.
Yeah.
Right? So that's something, and that gets worked into your mortgage.
Yeah.
Then, and that increases the number, right? So a lot of times we're looking at this and we're saying, oh, I have 25% of my house and I have 42% of my house in these two different scenarios. Well, I can afford 42%. I'd be really tight on everything, but I can afford 42%. But then what happens if you need to replace your roof and it's $10,000?
Yeah.
What happens if you're within the first 2 years of my living in my house, we had to replace our oven, our dishwasher, our washer and dryer, our microwave. We might have had to. We replaced our hot water heater. I don't know if it was within the first couple of years, but we replaced our water heater too. So, and we had to do all those. Yeah. Right. That wasn't an option. Right. I guess it is an option. I guess we don't need a washer dryer.
This is first world America. We need these things.
We needed them. So those were just additional costs, right, to owning a house that. If I'm really tight with my $1,500 a month for my mortgage and I can't possibly budget anything else, and then something comes up, well, I got to get that money somewhere. Yeah. So it's gonna take away from something else. Where if I'm at 42%, I'm really tight. Yeah. If I'm at 25 to 30%, I have a little bit of wiggle room. And if I'm saving 15% of my income, right, I'm putting 15% of my take home directly, immediately, right into retirement, which is what we encourage people to do, at least 15%.
Yeah.
If something comes up, I can always drop that down to 12%.
Yep.
And I'm still saving in my retirement, but I can pull a little bit of money out every single month, and then I can use it toward repairing something, right, if something needs to be repaired. Or I can use it toward medical, right? Yeah. How many times does something come up? Because we always plan, right, for when your kids get injured, right, Kevin? I mean, you always are completely prepared for when something happens and somebody needs to go to the hospital, right?
Yeah. I mean, you have emergency funds for stuff like that, which is nice, but insurance for, health insurance is nice, but those bills are just, hospital bills are just outrageous.
Yeah, yeah.
And, the money you need for that is high. But when it comes to, the housing thing, another rule that a lot of people say is budget 1% of the actual purchase price of your house for repairs.
Yeah.
So if you bought your house at $200,000, right, then you're able to, a couple $1,000s a year, have that on hand.
Just automatically, because you know something's going to go wrong.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you live in a brand new house.
Yeah.
Something's going to happen.
Yep. And you'll have to fix it. I mean, or you might want to do improvements, which also costs more. Yeah. So just really, when it all comes down to it, the budgeting is key. And actually, we kind of have a document that we're going to put in the show notes here that you can download and kind of create a quick budget. Mm-hmm. It's kind of set up for you to kind of quickly see what your expenses are and help you shed some light on your costs and what you can actually afford.
And see if you're overspending on stuff.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that we work with that, frankly, they think they're doing okay. And then once they actually write out what their expenses are, it's like an eye-opening thing. Like, are you kidding me? I'm actually spending that much on blank expense every single month? That's ridiculous.
Yeah, I actually worked with a client that had spent more than $400 in subscriptions. And they didn't know it.
And they didn't know it.
Yeah, they didn't know it. And that's the kind of thing where you might say I would never do that. Like, that's crazy. But, you're probably spending $50, $100.
I've worked with a client that was spending $1,200 a month on car payments.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I think they knew that they were doing it, but once they saw it on paper, and
Yeah.
they saw the percentage of their money that was going to just their car payment, they were like, "Are you kidding me? Why are we doing this?" Like, one of their cars alone was $750.
Yeah, it's
just for the one car.
Cars are crazy now. They really are, because
like, they're
doing like 84 months now.
Yeah.
I remember when 60 was a lot.
Yeah.
Then they had 72, 84. It's going to be like 10 years from now.
Yeah, it's going to be ridiculous. Yeah. So really quick, just in the show notes, we have that document. You can just put your income in. Remember, we're trying to go post-tax income. Mm-hmm. So this is your take-home income, and then you can just work through your expenses. And what this will do is just kind of illuminate a little bit of what am I spending. And if you're looking at getting a house, this will help you be like, okay, well, how much do I have where maybe I can cut something, right? Maybe I can cut something in, and maybe it makes sense for you to bump it up to 33%, 34% of your income if you can, for take home to get a house. We'd like to stick around 25 to 30, but the market's not great, and you need to live somewhere. Right, so maybe you need to bump it up, and maybe you need to take a little bit of money from somewhere. So where can you do that? Well, that's where having a budget document really helps you.
Yes.
It gives you the insight that you need. It gives you the information that you can make to make a good decision.
Yes, because this is probably the biggest economical decision you'll make.
I mean, frankly, it's probably the biggest purchase most people are going to do for their whole life.
Yes. Yeah. So don't just decide, okay, the bank says I can buy this. Do your own math and your own homework and make sure that you can, because once again, the bank isn't considering some factors that we mentioned here. So make sure that your new home that you've dreamed of doesn't become a nightmare. So keeping all this in mind, once again, we do recommend the 25 to 30% method over the 3 times your income for the math reasons that we showed.
Yeah.
And we hope that you did get something out of this, that you learned something new, and that you will do some of this planning before you buy a house.
Yeah, and let us know if this was helpful.
Exactly.
Let us know if you have any questions. If you have any specific questions on this kind of a topic, let us know. Comment on a podcast, or review, or on the YouTube channel, or email us, contact us, whatever. We'd love to know if this was helpful, if it wasn't helpful, what you'd like to know. Yeah, and in that, follow us on all our social medias. We have Facebook, Instagram, we have Twitter now. We also do YouTube. We're on YouTube, and we have a website, financialfeastpod.com, which has an about section that you can and also a contact us section that you can contact us with any emails or questions you may have there. So we do thank you for listening, and we look forward to seeing you next week.